if you only ever do what you're told to do, you always have to do what you're told to do. So I think that would be my biggest point to managers or someone that's trying to work in baseball that hasn't played is take initiative, figure it out, take something and run with it.
Steve Nagy is our third guest on the podcast. Steve just graduated from James Madison University, where he was a director of operations for the baseball team. Now, Steve and I know each other from our days at Maple Zone Sports Institute, and Steve's a really, really smart baseball mind. Steve has a blog that he's been posting almost every week during quarantine, and when you talk to him, you can really tell that he has a great passion for the game. So in this episode, we'll talk a little bit about what he does for JMU, or what he did for JMU while he was there, his internship with the Brewers, and using some of these sites like Baseball Savant and Brooks Baseball to further your own knowledge and continue to grow during this shutdown period.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to episode 4 of Talking Ball. Today we have Steve Nagy on the podcast, another young, great mind in the world of baseball. First off, Steve, I just wanted to congratulate you on graduating from JMU. So that's a big thing, especially with the coronavirus and all. I mean, it's definitely huge to see that you got through all that. But first, me and you have a little bit of a similar background. So we're both in college baseball, and we don't really have a playing career in college baseball, but the fact that we are still now in the coaching realm is really similar between us, and you're at JMU. So would you like to tell us a little bit about how you got into your position at JMU?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. This is my debut podcast. Yeah, so I started, I guess, kind of before JMU. For my whole life, I've absolutely loved baseball. I played through high school. My freshman year of high school, I started reaching out to MLB teams, basically asking them what I needed to do to get a job with them one day. And I really took all of that advice and just kind of put it to use. And then, a lot of that was, if you can't continue your playing career, stay in the game once you get to college, whether it's as a manager, whatever. So I ended up going the manager route. And I was a manager my freshman and sophomore year. My freshman year, I'd say I liked it, but I didn't love it. There was aspects to the job that were a little monotonous, that I kind of said, I still want to work in baseball, but I don't know that I want to maybe set up screens or feed machines for 4 years, which is an important job, not to discredit that job at all. Being a manager is important in a program, but I just knew that I wanted to do a little bit more than that. So I started to kind of take on other tasks. Basically, my freshman year, I remember basically going back to my dorm rooms, my dorm room, and I would type emails of high school recruits into our database for an hour or two every night. And one thing that I think kind of helped me was I learned how to master the small things before moving on to the bigger things. Because mastering the small things really opened up windows for me with our coaching staff and kind of built trust with them. So then, I took on more baseball stuff. I really didn't have any sort of analytics background. I remember in high school, laughing off spin rate, thinking that why would that ever be important? And then, once I got to JMU, I kind of saw that was maybe an area for me to add value to the program. And then I started to take on different jobs, more baseball wise. And by the end of my sophomore year, our coaches kind of asked me if I wanted to be our director of ops for my junior year.
Yeah, and so I think one of the questions I have off of that was when you decided that you wanted to go to JMU, right?
did
Mhm.
you know automatically you had already been in contact that you wanted to be a part of the program, you wanted to help any way possible? Or was that something that you got on campus and then you were like, you had the itch to continue to play or to continue to help out and be around the game?
Yeah, so I definitely still kind of had the itch to play. I kind of knew that I was a very, very average high school player. And I kind of knew that I wouldn't make the team, but I thought about, do I want to play club ball or do I want to work with the team, which would probably serve a better future for me. So I ended up going with the team. I think I reached out to our head coach, Coach Eigenberry, before coming down for my freshman orientation, and I met with him there. And he kind of explained the job to me, how much time it would entail, and told me to think about it. I called him over the summer, told him I was in. I got to school in the fall, and I think I was a little hesitant in the fall, even still. Looking back, I don't know why, but I think I started the second week of fall practice, so like maybe September 3rd or 4th of my freshman year, so pretty much right away.
That's awesome. I mean, hearing that story, just realizing how much or how similar, I should say, how our stories are. One question I had was, how was that transition of going from a student manager who, like you said, would just maybe feed a machine or move around screens to doing the more advanced stuff? How was that transition?
I think it was, in some ways, it was a little difficult at first because there were certain things that like I wasn't even allowed to do anymore. Like by no means was I an all-star fungo hitter, but I was no longer allowed to hit fungos during practice or throw with players where, I could do that as a student manager. And from another standpoint, like the managers that I'd been with for 1 to 2 years, I didn't want it to seem to them like I was like better than them in any way. I just had a different role. So I think that was kind of something that was maybe a little bit of a struggle for me at first, but I think everybody handled it well.
Okay, and another question that comes off of your time at JMU is it seems like the staff there has done a really great job at building up the managers, right? You have multiple managers that are helping. So can you talk a little bit about like the camaraderie between you all? It seems like you guys are from the outside, right? I'm looking on Twitter and such, but like it seems like you guys are pretty tight and like you're doing a lot of great stuff for JMU. So could you talk on that? Yeah,
we're definitely a tight-knit group. I've lived with one of our managers for 2 years now, Max Kidd. Sam Jorman does a great job. She does a lot of on-field stuff, but all of our video as well, like during games. Camden Kay has done a great job with a lot of different things. And then we have some like analytics managers, I guess, that came on junior year, and we've had a bunch of them, and they've, for the most part, have done a pretty good job too. They're a huge part of I guess the success that we've had.
Great. Now, so we'll turn a little bit, and I know that there's a lot that you can't say about your internship with the Brewers, but I just want to get your takeaways. And for those that don't know, Steve was it last summer? It was last summer, correct?
Yeah, it was last summer.
So summer of 2019, he had an internship with the Brewers, but just some of your takeaways from your time in professional ball for that summer.
Yeah. So, I think one of the biggest things is just you have to be open-minded if you're going to end up working at that level. And that is something that I want to do long-term. And I think that the people that are in it for the long haul are all open-minded. I think that there's also a lot of value in understanding the different departments. So like, say a scout, for example, he understands that his traditional perspective is super important to the game, and it always will be. But if he can also tie in understanding different elements of analytics and make that a part of his evaluation, and then maybe understand how the entire player development department works. So say like maybe an amateur prospect lacks bat speed, just if you value that, lacks bat speed, but you like everything else about him, and you you know that your organization has a track record of developing that speed, then as a scout, you can say like, okay, he does everything else really well. Maybe, from my perspective as a traditional guy, the analytics side, and I also know that he will develop well in our system if my assessment is correct. So I think that was something that kind of stood out, is how integrative all the departments are. But yeah, and then I think the other thing was basically, if you're not in on the data and tech stuff, you're going to fall behind.
Great. Wow. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And we'll play a little story time right now, because Steve and I know each other. We worked together for a summer. I think it was 2 summers ago at this point in time. So that's how I know Steve. And so we followed each other on Twitter for a while. I saw a lot of the work you were doing at JMU, and I was really impressed by what was going on, because at the time we knew each other, it was just like we were buddies, like hanging out, working, and neither of us were really like super into this, side of baseball. But it's funny how things have turned, and now I'll be honest, we had like an hour conversation before we even pressed play on this one, just about some of your takeaways. What are you thinking about this, that, and the other thing? And I think that's really cool. So, but what I'm trying to go after here, my long-winded transition, is Steve actually has a website, a blog that he's been posting a little bit since I believe it's April 21st. So early on in the spring, I think that's, right around when things went down with the virus and all. It's called stevenagybaseball.com, and Steve's posting a lot of articles, just things that he's thinking through and talking about. I know, especially early on in the articles, it was a little bit about what you were doing at JMU, things you guys were thinking about, ways you were doing player development. And recently it's been kind of, not as JMU centric, and just baseball in general. And I'll be honest, Brendan and I talked for a while about a lot of your articles. We were really impressed by the thing you were turning out. So what we'll do is, I want to give the listeners like a little taste of each one of these articles that Brendan and I really enjoyed. Now, of course, we don't want you to give it all away, because they got to go to stevenagybaseball.com and read it for themselves. But I think the first article that we loved it, because we love pitch design, is your pitch design article that you posted on April 21st. I'm reading my notes. And so without giving away all the secrets, right, what are some of your takeaways about the idea of pitch design, especially at the Division I level?
Yeah, so first off, maybe I'll have to make you guys the official podcast of stevenagybaseball.com.
Hey, whatever you got, man.
That'd be sweet.
But no, I think probably the biggest thing is kind of keeping the players on the same page. Like, at the end of the day, it's their career. So if they don't want to add a pitch, or maybe make a pitch better, in quotes, then I don't think they should have to do it. Just because something looks better on a computer screen, I don't think necessarily means that it becomes better in an actual game, which is really the only thing that matters. So I think, keeping every player in the loop as far as them determining what they want to do with their career. And it's, again, like their pitch design, it's their career. I think that another one of the biggest takeaways is that it's not always like in the pitch design, or I think when we think of pitch design, a lot of times we think of like the grip or how the ball leaves our hand, or the pitcher's hand, not my hand. And like, I think that a lot of times it starts like literally where you stand on the mound, has something to do with how a pitch moves. So even adjustments there, you could find a pitch fix. And then, we had one freshman pitcher who came back after winter break after using the core velo belt, and all of a sudden, he's getting into his backside more, and he gets more carry on his fastball. So it's not necessarily working on a specific pitch all the time. and changing the grip and changing all this different stuff. Sometimes it's just, guys moving differently, for better or worse, hopefully better. But yeah, I think those are the two things that really stand out the most. And I also think what's really important is playing off or designing a pitcher's arsenal around his best pitch. So like, maybe you have a guy whose best pitch is his slider. Then don't base everything else off of the fastball. Maybe you should base the fastball off of the slider.
You're
so I think that
right here. This is really good. I like that. That's a really good tidbit. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So basically, I think that a lot of what we did last year, I don't want to say that we did our players a disservice, but I do think there's a lot of improvements we can make going forward.
Yeah, no, I really love that statement of, especially when people think about pitch design, right? They think everything is around the fastball, right? Everything, all of your secondary pitches should be surrounding it. But you saying like you should think about what is the best pitch and how does everything else interact with that pitch, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, and if the pitch has had success in a game, then who cares? Like, if it doesn't look good on a computer, like, but it looks good in a game and hitters you're getting swings and misses and outs, like, doesn't matter.
Absolutely. And that comes back to the idea that we're really only scratching the surface, right, of things that we really understand about ball flight, how people move and what that means. So no, I totally agree. I love that philosophy of, in a way, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it's getting outs, don't touch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So basically what I want to talk about was, and this is a huge topic that we've been talking about, especially in the podcast, is that communication. I know a lot of teams nowadays are keeping track of all those stats and really, they're recording everything, but not a lot of these guys know how to actually say, hey, player A, this is how this is going to help you. I was wondering, what are some of the steps that you guys have taken to basically sell what you're doing to the players?
Yeah, so I think one of the ways to answer that question, we have a VAC. It's called a VAC assessment that all the guys get in the fall. It stands for visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, your learning type. And so I think at the very least, that is a big way for coaches to communicate with players. So like, I'm not promoting being a cookie cutter coach, like wanting every player to do the same thing. But at the very minimum, if that is, if you're a hitting coach and you believe that every hitter should have the same exact swing, you can still, at the very minimum, use the VAC assessment to understand how your player learns best. So if you're a visual learner, then you take that player aside and show him another player, whether it's on their team, another maybe a big leaguer, or maybe it's the same, the player that you're working with directly. Maybe it's just a previous good swing that he has had. Then you should show him, the visual learner, some sort of video of that. If you're an auditory learner, then maybe during an individual, you are using a certain cue with that player. If you're a kinesthetic learner, then maybe you're touching a hitter in some place, not in a weird way, but you're helping him move in the way that you want him to move. So yeah, I think that like at the bare minimum, that just shows your players that you're trying to get on the same page as them and trying to understand them as players.
And yeah, you hit a topic that we were going to talk about, right? We were going to talk about the VAC assessment blog that you did, right? And I wrote down in my show notes that, and I looked it up on Google, right? 65% of people are considered visual learners, right? But that doesn't mean that everyone on your team's going to hit that. Like, there's not going to be 65% of your pitchers who are also visual learners. So asking questions about how do they learn is fascinating and not something that I thought about. So I took something from that. My question off of the VAC assessment blog was, how did you come up with that? Like, were you reading something or talking to somebody that really became profound? And was this the first year that you guys did that? And would you do it again?
So no, I didn't come up with it. First of all, our coaches found it. It's like a well-known thing from somewhere. There's a link. I think I put it in the VAC assessment blog post.
Yeah, you did.
That takes you right to the test. You print it out. So that's like one of the first things we do every fall. All the players take it. So I don't remember if we did it my freshman year or not, because I've never actually taken the test myself. But the players take it every fall. At least for the past 3 years, they've done it.
First, Steve, I mean, I really wanted to give you props on the blog. Reading through it all, it's big time stuff, and it's extremely interesting. But one of my favorite articles on the blog was the adding value with the 2020 class that's being drafted. And one of the things I really took from that when you said the teams will be or you would rather a team carry too much talent and less dead weight. I was wondering if you could kind of expand on what your opinions on this draft are, especially with the guys that could have gone in those 6 to 20 round range that you had mentioned in your blog.
Yeah, so I'm kind of under the impression that that more players will be willing to sign than people think. Whether it's unfortunately programs getting cut and there's less roster spots, or guys want to get their start in college baseball, whatever it may be. I think that I do think that college baseball as a whole is going to be extremely competitive next year. But I do think that like the everyone's saying how it's going to be, all these guys are going to come back. I don't know. I feel like guys want to start playing professional baseball. And it's going to be tough for them to pass up that opportunity. In general, in a farm system, I mean, the amount of guys that are in a system just so that the best players can play is pretty eye-opening. So to me, like, that just presents an opportunity. Like, they're not getting paid a whole lot of money anyway. So, if you're willing to go out and, if you're the New York Yankees and you have all the money in the world, regardless. So even in the post I talked about it, even if the Yankees are struggling financially, I think that they should, raise debt and go out and sign 30 guys with a round 20 grade or higher for $600,000, which is pocket change. And, if you get 2 big leaguers out of that group, the amount of value that adds to your organization is huge. I just don't think many organizations are going to actually do that for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, no. And I think the one thing that bounces off of that, and it's a discussion that I've had, is right. It seems like you have this opinion about this topic, but everyone's talking about how, we're going to go, all these kids are going to go back and play college baseball, and college baseball will be the best it's ever been, at least talent wise. Right. And you're of the mindset that you think that more people will take the $200 or $20,000,
20.
20, take it and just go professionally. I agree with it. And I can tell you why, but I really want to get, is that just a sense you get from players in general that you've met during your time with the Brewers and even in college, that it's just like, why go back? Like, I've already done 3 years and been a great performer. If a team's willing to give me a contract, like, let's just get after it. I want to play.
I think it's mostly guys that are already in pro ball, not the guys at JMU. I agree that college baseball is probably going to be the most competitive that it's ever been next year, most talent. But like I said, like I just, if it was me personally, like $20,000, like, I don't know. It's only $20,000 and maybe I deserve $100,000, but it's also an opportunity to play professional baseball and you have no idea what's going to happen over the next year. So I just think that more players are going to be willing to take it than the public is making it out to seem.
I agree. And the more people that I talk to in college baseball, I get that view of people are seeing it as, look, there's 5 rounds, right? We're cutting all these rounds, but there's going to be a lot of people like they can go wild with it. They can send all these contracts out and you can get, and for lack of a better term, a lottery ticket on this player and just to get him a chance to get in the system and actually, get your hands on him and then tweak things and get them in your player development system. So I really enjoy like that viewpoint. And I think at least when it comes to like baseball Twitter, which is a horrific place in general, but when it comes to like the public doesn't really see that. They just see it as, okay, well, there's no more spots where you can get drafted. So, that's not going to be good.
Especially the kids that are coming from money are the ones that I think will be tempted to take it.
Yeah, there you go. That's another facet of it. And so we're going to transition it to our last article that we really enjoyed. But we're gonna try something new here. We're share Steve's screen and we're gonna take a look into it. And so this article was the Tanner Rainey should be better than Nick Anderson article, talking about a little bit about vertical attack angle. I know that's been multiple posts on your blog, but that one really struck out to me because I know Brendan and I like to talk about pitchers in that way using Baseball Savant, Brooks Baseball. But can you give us like a little bit of a deep dive, share the screen and show us what you're looking at and when making that article?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I want to say is like the article in no way, like I don't mean it to be like a knock on either pitcher. From Tanner Rainey's perspective, I think it's more so like, hey, like you could be really good. And from a Nick Anderson's perspective, I just think it's more of a compliment to him. All right, so the first thing that I really kind of look for in general is just trying to find outliers in one way or another. So maybe one player has, I kind of think of it as like bad process, good result, good process, bad result, good process, good result, bad process, bad result. And I'm kind of looking for the guys that have the good process, bad result. So in some ways, I think that was, or I think that the good process, bad result, I think that Tanner Rainey has a really good pitch, really good arsenal that is comparable to Nick Anderson, and that he should be performing better. So the first way, I guess, I went about just finding two pitchers in general for anyone that has never been on MLB or Baseball Savant. I saw that Nick Anderson here has vertical movement of 10.3 inches and his fastball is 96. He's right-handed, and his horizontal movement is 5.8 inches. And this is all in their four-seam fastballs. And then so
now,
basically,
Steve, can you really quick tell me? These numbers are really different than Rapsodo, right? And you alluded to that in your article, but I think that's a really a salient point for this discussion. But can you talk about that?
Yeah. So basically, on Rapsodo, when you think of a higher number, you think the better, the more vertical break. That's kind of the opposite on Baseball Savant. If you scroll all the way down, if you scroll, I'll sort it by movement here. So the guys with the most movement on Baseball Savant are actually the guys that have the most quote unquote drop to their fastballs, which is counterintuitive. Basically, the guys that have more carry on their fastballs have less movement because the ball doesn't drop as much. So just think of it as being backwards to Rapsodo or Trackman, whatever you're going off of. But yeah, so basically what I wanted to do is just find two pitchers that were pretty comparable on here from a movement standpoint. So I saw that Nick Anderson had 10.3 inches of vertical movement on his fastball. Tanner Rainey was 0.6 inches away from that. And then their horizontal movement was, what we got here, 1.7 inches different. And their fastball is a little over a mile an hour different. So after that, I went into their specific profiles, and I saw that Nick Anderson and Tanner Rainey both. So this is another thing that is difficult sometimes. Nick Anderson on Baseball Savant says that he has a curveball, but Brooks Baseball, which I'll get to, says that he throws a slider. I actually read a post since posting my article that he actually calls it a curveball. But I talked about it in my post as a slider. But
Right, because
either
it has
way,
more gyroscopic
the
spin,
movement,
right?
Yeah, I was just about to
yes.
top too.
Well, I think so. I'm not positive on that actually. But basically, the movement profile is very similar to Tanner Rainey's slider. The velo, I think, was 4 miles an hour off. So I'm not going to go like extremely in depth. You can read the article, but if we're just showing guys, anyone that doesn't have any experience going around on Baseball Savant, how to work it. Basically, I saw that Nick Anderson, even at first, so he got traded mid-season last year from the Marlins to the Rays, and you can see his numbers, how much better he got with the Rays than he was with the Marlins. His ERA improved by around 1.8 points. So if you go to Brooks Baseball, you can use all these cool charts. You can break it down by game and see that, like when he got traded, he started to use his four-seam fastball a little bit more, tapered off a little bit at the end of the year. But you can also see the performance against those pitches on the side here. I'm not going to go too in depth, but just showing people. So then you can see his movement profile in the scatter chart area, and just click on vertical movement on the side. So one thing that's also important about the movement profiles on Brooks Baseball is these are based off of pitch effects data, which is the last 40 feet, which is different than Rapsodo. And it's also flipped. So where your typical Rapsodo righty fastball, it would be over here, and the sliders would be over here. Slider/curveball would be over here. This is from the catcher's perspective. And then just another good source for data is Baseball Prospectus. You can see different performance against different pitch types on this website. Sort it. Really, like, you can get extremely in depth on here. Let's see if this will update. Yeah, it did update. So this is outcomes, your averages. Yeah. So all three of these are really good resources I use a lot. You can make custom leaderboards on Baseball Savant. So if you scroll up to the top, go leaderboard, custom leaderboard. There's so much data out there. You just need to figure it out, which was one of the toughest parts for me at first. So like here, custom columns, right? If you want to see, instead of expected batting average, you want to see WOBA. Then you have all these down here. And then the last thing I wanted to point out on the Baseball Savant website, you can click on StatCast and then click on a certain pitch, and it'll take you right to the video.
Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, Brandon and I love using Baseball Savant. I mean, we use it a lot just to talk about, even like we're talking about active spin, like the ball that you have there and showing how it's spinning. Right. It says Anderson relies on 2 pitches, 4-seam. That's like their version of spin efficiency, which I think is so interesting, right? That we finally get like another metric that Rapsodo kicks back for us and shows us how efficient they're really using all that spin towards movement. But it's really fascinating. I love talking about baseball and using that information. And I know Brandon and I have a lot of conversations on that. I'll even kick it to Brandon really quick. Brandon, we use it a lot. We talk with it a lot. What is one of your favorite functions with either Savant, Brooks, that you like to use to like look at players?
Absolutely. We always like to just play a little game where we pick a random player, pick a player we we enjoy watching. I mean, even with us, we like to pick players that maybe other people don't know and then compare them on Baseball Savant, which I think is a really fun and intuitive way to learn. But personally with Baseball Savant, I just feel like Steve had touched on all the data that's available. You can pretty much there's endless possibilities of what you can or how you can compare the players. And honestly, I feel like that's my favorite part, just the ability to compare the players and pretty much do what Steve had done with Tanner Rainey and Nick Anderson. It's just the fact I don't want to say it's easy, but it definitely makes it all more accessible to someone like us who doesn't have the archives of data, and also it's just a lot of fun. So that's personally my favorite thing.
No, I really agree with that. So I think to wrap it up really quick here, Steve, I really want to get an inside view at what you're kind of going after during this, virus shutdown when we really don't, we don't have baseball. What are you researching? What are you thinking about? How are you trying to improve yourself, during what seems to be a lot of downtime for a lot of people like us who are in college and, professional baseball?
Yeah. So, when it first shut down, there was like a few days of, I guess, kind of disbelief where it was like, you got to be kidding me. Like my senior year, like, I'm just as invested as the players are. Like, this is not how I wanted to go out. And kind of feeling bad for myself, I guess. But, I tried to not do that. Just kind of take a really good attitude towards the whole thing. And really started to look at them as an opportunity. So I've taken 2 Python courses online through Udemy. And that's not necessarily something that I enjoy, but having so much downtime, it was a great time to figure it out. And I've taken a couple courses in the past, but having so much downtime really, really helped. And then I was kind of thinking that I wanted to figure out an area to like actually apply it. I knew that I wanted to apply it to baseball, but actually post it somewhere, which was one of the reasons I started the blog, to kill some time, but in part also to show what I've been working on. And I do think that there's some value that I've added to the table. And, at some point I'd like to build some platforms for coaches, whether it's like Blast Motion, dashboards or whatnot. I think one of the biggest hesitations I actually had at first or for a long time about like posting stuff publicly is like, I want players to understand that like what we do for them is for them, not so something like looks cool on a Twitter post or a blog. But I've sort of gotten over that to an extent. Coach Jackson always pushes me to share stuff. And I think that, I do think that there's a lot of value in actually taking what you learn and applying it. So those are the kind of the 2 things that I've been attacking, is learning how to code. And then, I have a lot of different interests. I don't think that I would want to do coding for 8 hours a day, but there's a lot of questions that I have that I think starting the blog has pushed me to answer. And, just other random topics like I think my coach evaluation system or the undrafted free agents, like different topics around baseball that I do have interest in. So kind of just a platform for me to put everything.
That's huge. People are definitely going to have to go visit that blog. But one last thing I wanted to touch on is there any kind of advice that you'd have for someone maybe in our shoes who didn't have that college baseball career but wants to stay in the game? I know we had touched about it earlier, but just anything else that you can offer to a player that possibly could be in our shoes?
Yeah, so I sometimes I feel like I could read a book. Not to say that I know everything, but I just feel like my 4 years at JMU were just so huge for me. And there's like just so much that I learned and was so valuable. I just, I kind of feel inclined to pass it along. I think maybe the biggest thing, you have to be a baseball person first. And I think that was something that helped me when I got to JMU is, I completely overlooked the data. I was essentially a player that didn't play. And I think that, once you actually develop relationships with players and coaches, they're definitely going to be way, way more open to hearing what you have to say about, like if I had come in right away, right off the bat and made pitch design recommendations or whatever, they would have laughed me away and been like, who the heck is this guy? So I think just being a person first is huge. I would also say, try to exceed expectations in everything that you do. Even if it's just you competing against yourself. So like one thing I always say is like, I hope that a year from now, I get to laugh at whatever project I put on, whether it's my blog or whatever I put together. I hope that a year from now I can laugh at it, not because it was poor quality, but because, I'm trying to take something to the next level. I think another thing that has always kind of fired me up, like a quote that has fired me up. I don't even know who it's from, but it's, if you only ever do what you're told to do, you always have to do what you're told to do. So I think that would be my biggest point to managers or someone that's trying to work in baseball that hasn't played is, take initiative, figure it out, like take something and run with it. And maybe my last point, I think baseball in general, we have like a tendency to kind of look within baseball for answers. And something that I do a lot is look to other industries. I'm very interested in like the business world. I think a good organization is a good organization. So, don't pigeonhole yourself to just learning about baseball. I think that pretty much everything you do, you can somehow connect back to baseball. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
Man, that was great. Steve, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about all of this and kind of what you're thinking about. I know I'm really impressed. We've given you a shout out on the blog, and for those who have thought about reading it, it's stevenagybaseball.com. And you can why don't you give us your Twitter handle just in case, so we can get people.
Yeah,
to the blog.
I actually kind of forget it sometimes. There's an underscore somewhere. Let me look. It's Steve underscore Nagy 7, Nagy. Steve underscore Nagy 7.
And so you can reach out.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to.
Go ahead.
For sure. I was just going to say, reach out, whatever. That's another one of the cool parts about the blog and why Coach Jackson was pushing me to do it, is to gain perspective from people outside of our coaching staff that I've, my feedback has been from them for the last 4 years. So maybe it's time to branch out a little bit and hear some other perspectives, because I, maybe for the most part know what they're going to say when I bring them something.
Yeah, no. So if you want to follow him on Twitter, you got his Twitter handle, you got the blog. So Steve, no, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, getting a chance to talk some high level baseball in such a weird time. So I appreciate it, man.
No, thanks for having me on, guys.
Great talk.
I'm glad that the coronavirus gave you an opportunity to do this.
Really great episode with Steve Nagy. And I know we talked a little bit about his blog and his Twitter, so just one more time, his Twitter is at Steve underscore Nagy 7, and that's 1G. And then if you're looking to read his blog and look at some of those articles that we talked about on today's podcast, you can find those at stevenagybaseball.com. Everything's lowercase there. So thanks again. Next week, we're actually going to have Connor Hinchliff on. And Connor is a minor league pitcher for the Phillies. He trained out at Driveline this year, is a LaSalle baseball alum, so he's from the greater Philadelphia area. So we're really excited to bring him on and talk about his experiences, in minor league baseball after 1 year, since he just got into minor league ball, and some of the training he did this past winter and the shutdown. So I can't wait for you guys to hear that one, and I'll talk to you soon.